The Vietnam War was a long, costly armed conflict that pitted the communist regime of North Vietnam and its southern allies, known as the Viet Cong, against South Vietnam and its principal ally, the United States. The adhesive war, increasingly unpopular at home, ended with the withdrawal of U.S. forces in 1973 and the unification of Vietnam under communist control 2 years later. More than 3 million people, including 58,000 Americans, were killed in the conflict.
I was in the Vietnam War for 3 years. I spent a little over 21 years in the Air Force. 3 of it was in Vietnam. I loved it in this sense. I don't love being at war because I don't care how good you are at your job. You can be the best fighter pilot. I was a navigator. My eyes were 20/50, so I couldn't go to pilot training, but I was a navigator. And as a navigator on a C-130, those 2 airplanes.
A navigator is the person on board a ship or aircraft responsible for its navigation. The navigator's primary responsibility is to be aware of ship or aircraft position at all times. Responsibilities include planning the journey, advising the ship's captain or aircraft commander of estimated timing to destinations while en route, and ensuring hazards are avoided. The navigator is in charge of maintaining the aircraft or ship's nautical charts, nautical publications, and navigational equipment, and generally has responsibility for meteorological equipment and communications.
The Lockheed C-130 Hercules is a 4-engine turboprop military transport aircraft designed and built originally by Lockheed. The aircraft had a wingspan of 133 feet and a length of 98 feet, combining to make a top speed of 368 miles per hour.
Down that way, you have a radar and you keep that airplane out of the mountaintops because you're flying down through valleys in bad weather. You can't see the mountains. You have to fly sometimes through basically hurricanes, monsoon season, where you got tops up to 55, 60,000 feet, and they're spitting out hail, and updrafts and downdrafts can snap the wings off your airplane. And the navigator has to pick a spot sometimes to go through these things because it might be 120, 150 miles to go around it. They're so large, they're like almost approaching 1,000 miles, the length of these things as they're moving in Southeast Asia. And so you have to know what you're doing. And I enjoyed it, I loved it. They had. Now I flew in Vietnam and I never really got that feeling that our country's at risk. We were in Vietnam to stop the aggression of communism and the spread of communism was what I felt. That's why we were there. And we didn't accomplish that because the enemy, even though they didn't have the resources, they were getting it from China, and they probably were even getting it from Russia, communist nations. So they had more resolve because at one time, that whole country was one country, Indochina, okay? Then the French came in and they took part of it, and then it ended up North Vietnam and South Vietnam, and we supported the South Vietnamese because we felt as though the North Vietnamese were being too aggressive and they were representing communism. But there were over 58,000 guys that died in Vietnam. I very easily could have been one. Back to where my career. As we're approaching graduation from Bombardier School, we had seen every 2 weeks there was a class that was graduating. And a half a dozen classes in a row were getting some assignments, maybe a half a dozen assignments out of 30. That would be to Europe in a B-66, which was a medium-sized bomber, not a B-52, a big one. Or B-57 to Japan, which is flying around and doing sneaky Pete stuff, high altitude, and weather recon and stuff like that. And I was the third guy in our class in that. And so I went to the two guys ahead of me because I knew that if there was, I talked it over with my wife, we were married by then, and I said, I think now would be an ideal time for us to go overseas. We don't have any kids, and get some great experience overseas, and she agreed. And so we had made up our minds that if there was an assignment to either Japan or Europe, we would take it. So I got a hold of the two guys ahead of me, and they were family guys, they had kids, and they were not gonna take their kids overseas. So if there would have been one assignment, I would have gone overseas, but as it turned out, they were all B-52s in our class, the first class that had all these B-52s, except to 5 assignments in the Tactical Air Command, which is traditionally a fighter outfit, okay? But these TAC assignments, 2 of them were into KB-50s, which is a refueler, and a B-50 is like a B-17, actually a B-29 that's been beefed up with jet-assisted engines on it and stuff like that, but they were very old. The B-29s were in World War II, and this is 1963 when we're graduating, so they were pretty old. They were 15, 18 years old. And some of these things, some of these planes, the wings would just fall off of them. And I thought, hey, I intend to have a nice long career in the Air Force. I don't want to get down anytime soon. So those 2 assignments were out. The other 3 assignments were into the C-130s. This little one that's on that set of troop carrier, but it's much more than troop carrier. You drop troops, you drop equipment, you fly into dirt airfields, short airfields, where the enemy's at, and resupply stuff. And so I took one of those because I wanted adventure, because guys sort of like to play games sometimes with each other. And so he said, no, this is on the level. So I went back down to the squadron and I said, well, Anderson, did they cancel your assignment? No. Well, yes, they did, but they gave me an assignment to Tachikawa Air Base near Tokyo. What? Is your old man a 3-star general or more? No, this just happened. Because, like I said, nobody had gone anywhere for 3 years, and now, all of a sudden, I get this plum assignment. Well, yeah, it was a plum assignment, but it was 3 years of flying in Vietnam, 15 days each month for 3 years. And I've got at least a dozen war stories and a bunch of gray hair from a lot of those missions, and 2 what they call DFCs, Distinguished Flying Crosses. DFCs you get when you get back from a mission, and the mission was something that maybe you might get back from, maybe not. You know, it was a very hazardous kind of thing, and took, you know, luck and good airmanship to get through it. So I got 2 DFCs in Vietnam and had all kinds of adventures in Vietnam. And I was 25 to 28, and when you're in that time frame, you know, it's not like you're full of courage and fearless. It's like you're so focused on your job when you're in a combat zone that nothing else affects you. You're just so focused in, you have to be, or you're gonna be in the mountaintops because you're flying down through a valley that's socked in weather. And it was magnificent in the sense that I say, here I am coming up on 77, and I got out of the Air Force at age 43, so that's 34 years ago. That's a long time ago. And over that span of time when I got out, I worked for Frito-Lay Corporation. I worked for a finance corporation lending money for homes. I worked for the University of Colorado in Denver for 29 years. I had a lot of decent, good jobs, nice jobs. None of them compared to the little over 21 years I had in the Air Force. Why? Wasn't because I made more money there. It was the total package of adventure and the total package of getting to see parts of the world that I never ever would have seen. I've been to Africa and slept on the airplane with some mosquito netting around me, and we ran out of food and you couldn't get any food where we were at in Africa. And the airport where we landed at had bullet holes all through the terminal, you know, on the outside of it. And we had a mission to leave that airport and go out to a place called Boekevoo, which the people from Holland, the Netherlands, had that sort of like summer resort out there, that little thing. And they were being ambushed out there by these terrorists from a tribe, really just, you know, like 7-foot Watusi warriors, but it was just a regular tribe that didn't like them to be there, didn't want them to be there, was going to run them off, kill them. And we had to take ammunition out there. And one time I had a low-level mission over the North Pole with 17 Norwegian explorers that were working. I had this mission through National Geographic, and National Geographic calls the State Department and says, hey, can you provide an air crew? And the State Department goes to Department of Defense, can you provide this air crew to take these 17 explorers on this mission so they see what it looks like out over where they're going to go? And Department of Defense goes to the Air Force, and the Air Force comes down to our base, and our base they select the crew that I'm on. Not because we were some kind of super outstanding crew. In fact, my aircraft commander he was not a favored son at all. And he was the kind of guy that he's going to kill you if you don't stay on top of him. And between the co-pilot and myself, I'm sure he was a captain and we were both second lieutenants, but we knew what we were doing. We had good judgment, street cred, as they say. And this guy was a reserve pilot, engineer, smart as a whip, but had made the decision that he's coming in the Air Force. He was working in the reserves and got the opportunity to go on to active duty during the Cuban crisis and stay, and made that decision to do that. And he was sort of running scared the whole time. You know, I need to get promoted to major. I need to get promoted to lieutenant colonel. I need to kiss butt wherever I can kiss butt. You know, it was horrible, and he would do irrational things as a result of it. So anyhow, what can I say? It was a great life. When I graduated from the Air Force, i.e. retired from the Air Force, I went on, worked for Frito-Lay, then worked at University of Colorado, did a number of other things, mortgage financing, blah, blah, blah. And all of it was good jobs, decent paying jobs, but none of it would come close to what I got to experience with the Air Force.